Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us for part 2 of our Millennials 2020 webinar with Tom LaForge. Today is part 2, effective communication with millennials. And joining me again is Tom. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you.
And just very briefly, let me go back through Tom's background. Most recently, Tom was Coca-Cola's Global Director of Human and Cultural Insights, and as he was also called Coca-Cola's Futurist. He was also Vice President at Cheskin Consulting. Serves on the National Academy of Sciences Roundtable for Social and Behavioral Sciences. He's an advisor to the Masters of Market Research program here at UGA, and he is a keynote speaker, very much in demand, both domestically and internationally. And Tom, thank you again, and off we go.
Great, happy to be here. And
thank you.
We're going to be talking about how to communicate to millennials, but I know it's on everybody's mind, so I thought my very first slide, let's just get this out of the way. What's going on with the election? And this is a slide where the picture of the map there is going all over the internet. Many of you probably have seen it. Millennials are sending it to each other. And the question that we all need to think about is, had they voted, this is how they would have voted. But really what we're finding out is very few of them actually went out there and did vote. What I find more interesting is on the right there is that a lot of millennial-centered media are talking to these people about how do you cope with this? How do you deal with the fact that Trump won? How do you deal with such stress? And then there's a kind of a little finger waggling going on with that bottom article there. They're really kind of reprimanding each other, saying, if we had only gotten out and voted. So there's a lot more to digest about this election. I know we all could talk about it for the whole hour, but let's get into helping you understand how can you improve how you communicate your message to millennials. Now, I did a lot of work before because what I do is I study these different subcultures. I study groups like millennials, but I don't know your industry the way that you do. And so what I'm going to try to do is help kind of give you some ideas. And I know some of them will be helpful to you, but others you will have heard before. I probably read 20 to 30 different articles and papers on how to communicate and how to talk about your business. And these are the types of things I found most often. I call them platitudes because platitude has two connotations. One is they actually are true. These are things that are truisms and you can't deny them. So I will be referencing these. But they also are so general that they're really hard to do anything with them. And so what I did is I really made an effort to try to address these platitudes, but make them more specific so that you can actually figure out when you sit down and try to do something like create an experience, what will you actually be doing? So what I did is I thought, I'm going to try to tell you things that you haven't heard before. Since I saw so much of these reports that I had been reading before, we're saying very similar things. I didn't want to simply repeat them. If you want to go out and find out how to communicate with millennials, SEER and a lot of other places that you go to for big data, they have it. I'm going to help you try to think differently. And what I mean by that is I really think that most of what I'm going to say is going to be meaningless to you because it'll be different in a meaningless way. But what you do take from this should have some kind of meaning to you. It'll have some meaning to other people. To other people, it'll have less meaning, but still some meaning there. What I'm challenging all of you to do is to ask yourself, of the about 50 slides that we're going to see today, can you find the 10 or so gems that are meaningful to you while everybody else is doing the same themselves? So here's the outline of what we're going to be talking about. When it comes to communication, it's a very broad subject. So I've got the who, when, and how going first. And then I want to talk a little bit about different media channels and tonality. So here we go. So first subject is what to communicate. And this is an interesting question because you can answer this in so many different ways. And what I have here is a message from a guy named Jonathan Haidt. His book is underneath the number 1 there. It's called The Happiness Hypothesis. And he uses a really fun metaphor in there. We all know we have different sides to our brain. There was thinking fast and slow that came out last year. Some people say I'm left brain or I'm right brain. He uses the metaphor of a rider on an elephant. And it's an important metaphor because it's about the fact that you have two different types of brain. You have the rational brain and you have the emotional intuitive brain. The elephant represents your emotional intuitive brain, and the writer is there to help guide and correct this emotion. Now, sometimes that emotion is you want another piece of cake, and the writer says, no, we're not going to do that. But he uses the metaphor of an elephant because if your emotions are thinking of they want to do something, there's sometimes no way you're going to stop them. Emotions are much more important when it comes to helping people decide what they're going to do. So emotions come first, rationality second. And what do I mean by emotions first? Well, they create intent. It's your emotional desire to do something, whether it's to attend a conference or it's to meet somebody. It's an emotional desire. Now, how I feel when I attend one of these conferences, what is it that you're trying to convey? Your communication should give people the opportunity to put themselves into the environment that you want to attract them to. I picked pictures here that show much more clearly, that's how I will feel if I am there. Humans are the best way to convey emotion, just human-to-human experience, but you're not going to be able to reach everybody. So try to use video when you can't use real people. When you can't use video, use pictures. When you can't use pictures, maybe you can record voice. Podcasts are great. And of course, music is also a great communicator of emotion. So reason comes second. And this is the facts. I studied a lot of how did the different conferences that I found online advertise themselves. And there was a lot of emphasis on this. You guys are really good at focusing on, we got to get the facts out. And you know what the facts are. And you know I have to tell the whens and the wheres and who's going to be there, what the agenda is. This is stuff that I was thinking about this. An attendee looks at this and goes, oh, okay, I've decided I want to go. My emotional desire to go is there. I need to prove to my boss that he's got to sign off on this, or I can prove to myself, why am I paying for this? And that's where these reasons really come in. Who is speaking and what the exhibits are and who's attending, those are very good reasons to attend. And also notice that they are humans, they convey emotion. So you get kind of a twofer there. And then I referenced some research there that shows some of the many different reasons to attend conferences. I saw probably 5 or 6 different lists like this, so I'm sure you all are familiar with these types of lists. Now the image on the right there, check out how much better it gets when it has my face on it. All right, this is just simply showing that you can provide the reason, to effective communication with millennials, but also try to add some emotion when you're conveying these messages too. Now, if you want to get even better than my pretty face, then you've got to go to something like this. A picture where it shows a person engaged in a conversation is a much better shot. I'm looking at the camera. People want to feel as if they are in that type of a conversation. So it's not just showing a person, but you can really get better at finding the right picture. And all of you who have been around for a while, A/B testing is something that we've all been doing. That's just simply, and with SurveyMonkey and other devices out there, other sites out there, you can do some of these literally overnight. I could test those 2 images to see, wow, if I use the image with my face on there, look at the bottom, I get 400 attendees. That's a 4% response rate. It's only 2% more than the other one, but it's a difference of 200 people attending. If we had tested this one, if it had gone up to 10%, you've gone from being a person who's putting on a conference that's doing okay to being a rock star. This is how I made my money before I worked at Coke. We did tons of communication testing like this. And honestly, every detail counts. We found that even the fonts and the font colors and the background colors could boost response rates very, very well. Okay, so we've got 2 layers of communication going. I say, try to figure out what is your emotional message? What is that hook? Oh, you're going to come here because you're going to feel so connected. You're going to feel so happy or joyful. It's in a really exotic location, or you're going to be state of the art. Then you give them the reasons why you can actually deliver on that. But there's a third thing that millennials are asking for. Millennials are one of the most other-oriented. I used that in my first presentation. They are involved in causes. They want to buy products that support causes. They're much more connected. It's about being part of the larger world is what they're looking for. And we've been applying this at Coca-Cola because when I started my career in marketing, it was about functional and emotional attributes. Any of you have been in the consumer goods package world? That's been like the standard. Every brand has to have a good list of those. For Coke, it was about feeling happy, and the functional side was really about great taste and refreshing. But the Coke brand and dozens of other brands right now have all added this social side. frankly, large companies are distrusted. And so what these companies, if you're buying a product from a company that people don't trust, that is a social taboo among the millennial generation. You need to buy Tom's shoes and these other brands that show the world that you think of somebody other than yourself. The company thinks of something other than themselves and just profit. So how does that relate to what we're doing here? You've got a conference or an event that you're putting on, and you need to have an emotional, so you decide first, what emotion do I want people to feel? Second, what are the reasons that they should attend? You know, you're going to learn, you're going to network, you're going to be up to date in your industry and know what's happening. But then, I don't know how often this happens, but I've been to a few conferences where it's never something you lead with, but the message is, we're going to be donating extra food to the local food closets, or everything is going to be recycled at this event. Somehow you're showing that there's a social connection. Sometimes you do excursions where you go and volunteer. There's different ways to do that. How you do it is up to you. But ask yourself, if I want to improve my communications, I got to nail the emotion, have to have the functional there. And for a bonus, if you want to get the millennials there, find some social layer as well. So when I was looking at all the different reasons that are out there, the things that would fall into the justification for going, I hope this rings true to you, but it tended to fall into two big buckets. It's the keeping pace with the industry, and then it's the building my personal skills. There's many different dimensions to each of those, but those are the two big areas that I was noticing. And these different citations that are here at the top of the slide, these Meetingsnet and Ungerbach, I hope I'm saying that right. You see these all the time. People are saying things like create a career path or create an area where you can help them network and self-educate. It's not like this idea isn't out there, but I felt like those are, again, platitudes are very general, or at least not focused the way they could be when you're talking to a millennial crowd. So I gave an example here. Anna Akbari is a brilliant person I met when she was a professor at New York University. She's now an entrepreneur out in California, and she has a book coming out in December, which is about how to help hustle and hack your way to happiness. It really is a book about how these millennials are going through this idea of going into the adult world. In fact, if you just Google the word adulting, you see a lot of the angst and worries that young people have as they try to figure out how are they going to build their career, become an adult, build a household. And she coaches people through those two activities of how do you manage your life and your career. And just look at some of the phrases she uses. I think if you just talk about hustling and hacking, that's something that is going to resonate with these young people. You got to help them feel like they're going to come away with a benefit, which is I've learned my career is better after attending. But that's certainly the most highest priority. The second one is presenting that idea in language that they relate to. There was an article in the New York Times by David Brooks called The Practical University. And I use this as an example because there's the key idea in there is about theoretical knowledge and practical knowledge. Honestly, when I was asking myself, is there really a future for what you do? Because everything can be done online now. I mean, every industry is asking this, and I'm sure you've all asked yourselves this as well. Well, he was talking, David Brooks, in this article about the future of universities, because now we have online universities, and you can read almost anything you want for free. That's theoretical knowledge. If I give you a book to figure out how to cook, like the Zucchini cookbook on the side there, you are learning through theory. Reading a book has all the right ideas, but it's not until you really practice it and you're working in the kitchen side by side with a chef that you truly understand that work. That's the practical knowledge. Practical knowledge is where I think your key advantage is. While I could attend your conference even online and watch the videos, by being there, you have an opportunity to give me a practical education. And the ideas listed here are frankly riffs on the book Lean In, and it's being assertive in a meeting, how to disagree pleasantly, how to attract mentors. Notice these are interpersonal skills, and you can only practice those with other people. I wonder if one of the things that I would do if I was asking, do I want to send more than 2 or 3 of my people to your conference? If they came back with these types of skills, I would be very happy. So remember I was talking about keeping pace with industry trends and helping to build your skills. The skill stuff tends to be more like the technical stuff. Okay, you go there, you would have to probably be much more focused on the type of conference you have. But the practical stuff, the practical knowledge can go to almost any conference at all. It doesn't matter what your industry is. Those items with the orange dots would apply to every attendee. Okay, now, what about when do we communicate? There's a very practical, easy to apply thing to know, which is if you're going to start using social media, there's a lot of data out there on when's the best time to tweet. If you're looking for click-throughs and you want people to go to your website, click in the morning times. If you're looking for likes and retweets, late afternoon and early evening and even late into the night are when millennials are checking on their Twitter accounts. So that's a real simple idea. Let's go to a couple of somewhat bigger ideas. Now, when you're talking about when to communicate, I'm sure a lot of you have used something called journey mapping. And it really is simple. It's like okay, let's think of the experience this person is going to go through before, during, and after the event. Now, while this is not something I want to kind of teach and tell you about, because there's many of you know better how to do that than I do want to show you one way where we can think about this differently than you might have in the past. There's a lot of work being done. In fact, there's an entire field of research being done called positive psychology. Psychologists are learning about really what makes us human and what helps us enjoy a good life. There's the concept of savoring, and there are people that have written their dissertations on how do you savor good moments. And the research on savoring is showing that we can intensify and really prolong our enjoyment of something. And I'm asking myself, how can we get people to really intensify and enjoy and prolong the enjoyment they get from your events? The before stuff is what can we do to help them with anticipation? Just think about a child getting excited for their birthday coming up next week. How do we create that feeling? And then we have the other two aspects. And so here are some examples. This is something that you can probably study more in detail later. I'll just go through it quickly. But there are things we can send them to help build anticipation. And one of the things I put at the bottom there from a millennial, the millennial people are saying, oh, you want me to come in and experience your event or your city? You want to see it through their eyes. What is it we could send them that would help them feel like, I know how what it would be like to be in that city as a millennial? Frankly, coming from somebody who's not a millennial, it starts to feel more like the visitor center as you cross the state lines. Now, presence and expression in the middle here, they kind of contradict each other. You need to be present, meaning in the moment, but you also are trying to share this. A lot of rock stars, will.i.am was famous for telling people that if you come to my conference, I can't stand it. You're not even really here. You're videoing the whole thing with your phone. These are so relevant and important to millennials, you cannot ignore one or the other. How do you bring them into the moment, but also allow them to share? The word tumbler on the bottom there is an interesting one. It's a Yiddish word that a friend taught me, because in the Yiddish communities, and this is an older profession, you would be a tumbler, and a tumbler is somebody you would hire at like a wedding. And their job was to simply go around and make sure everybody was having a good time, and to get people dancing if they weren't dancing, and to get people socializing if they weren't socializing. It's sort of just sort of getting the action going. What is it we could do to help encourage these young people to say, this is a tweetable moment, this is a shareable moment, or better still, interacting with each other there at the location? And then finally, there's some ideas there for reflection. How do we help them remember the event in a positive way? There's a lot here on the slide. Hopefully you can get more from it later, but I'm going to keep moving. Presence is the idea. It comes in many forms. You're hearing this, and I was amazed by how much business literature uses terms like mindfulness, for example. And it's hard to be present when you have a device. Every professor would tell you that most of his students, he's not sure if they're listening to the lecture or not when they're looking down at their devices, but they certainly are all looking at their devices. Google really did a fantastic job of taking a lot of stuff that can sound a little West Coast and airy-fairy and turning it into hardcore science. What they did with this book that they titled Search Inside Yourself is they turned it into an institute. It's actually a division of the company now. And search inside yourself starts off with a question that an HR director had, which is, how do I get people to work together effectively as a team? Well, if I'm going to work together with other people, I need to know myself first. That's social intelligence, but preceding that, I have to have emotional intelligence. And they had all these programmers, these 23-year-old men coming into the office that frankly had very bad social skills. They had to teach them how to understand their own emotions. And so mindfulness, and they worked with Kabat-Zinn Jr., Kabat-Zinn, I can't remember his name. He's a famous psychologist. He helped people with mindfulness and meditation. And this course now teaches them to get in touch with their emotions so that they can understand how they're feeling, so they can understand other people, so they can work better as a team. It turns it into a practical business utility. 73% of millennials want to be a part of live polls too. So a live poll, here's one, for example. I know many of you have probably tried this. Sometimes it seems hokey, sometimes it works. We're even doing it now in stadiums where we're picking the next song that's going to be played. But ask yourself, which of these answers would you want? And on your keyboard, you got the numbers 1 through 5. I'm going to have a countdown timer. Ready, go. Press 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 on your keyboard. Timer is closed. All right. Well, it looks like this is live voting is a great idea. Thank you very much, everybody. I'm going to be providing copies of my presentation to all but 4 of you. All right. When will we take the time? Now, when I was in this section that we're in right now, which is called when to communicate, one of the things that I thought was, wow, you might come away from this, and my hope is you say, I have a lot of great ideas, but you know what, Tom, you're asking me to do more work, and my job is really stressed. And this is a very difficult thing. This report right here, and by the way, in every slide that has a picture of a book or a report, in the notes section, I have a link to that book or that report. You can go ahead and read this full report. And this is a theme I saw a lot, is that, frankly, you've got a lot to do. And so these types of evolutions to doing what you do differently just don't happen. I wish I had the time as the response. And frankly, I'm not going in this presentation to solve that problem for you. You need to figure out, if you could just find 1 or 2 ideas here that you feel are worth putting in a little extra time, which 1 or 2 are you going to focus on?
We have a question from someone live.
Sure.
Let's go ahead and take that. Millie, you are live. Go ahead, please. Okay, Millie, I'm afraid we can't hear you, so we're going to go ahead and move on. And if you have a question, you can also submit it through the Q&A button as well. Thank you.
All right. All right, the next section is how to communicate. There's a lot of reports out there, and this is a rather good chart too. And I've circled down on the bottom the millennials, and comparing yourself to a millennial is a really important point, because the nature of my job, I've been in market research and cultural research my whole life. The nature of what we do as a profession is introduce one group of people to the other. I'm trying to introduce millennials to you. And the intent is that you can put yourself in their shoes. It's the hardest thing that human beings do, but it's when you do it well, you become by far a much better communicator. On this chart, let's just look at 2 things. The first thing I want to show you is what messages are really motivating. A lot of us, and I'm going to count myself as a boomer too, you are valued and needed. You wanted to make sure that you are making a contribution. And if you read, a lot of Europeans will particularly tell you that when they read American resumes, wow, you all sound like you're really proud of yourselves. We try to prove our worth and our value. We even have terms like adding value in our vocabulary. But look at the bottom. A millennial isn't as interested in that. The way you would motivate them is to help them feel like they're going to work together as part of a team. We talk about collaboration. This is an aspect of that. Now, here's when I thought, okay, I just told you a good goal might be to convey to these millennials that if you attend, you will feel like you are part of a collaborative team. You will work with other bright, creative people. And there is no better way to do that than with the photographs here. Photographs of your past events are a great resource. We'll be talking about how to improve that pool of that resource pool later. But ask yourself, how, looking at this, do I give the impression that you are a collaborative participant? I would say that these were the minority pictures I found. Most pictures were you were a passive observer. Millennials are looking to participate. Okay, a second one is obviously not news to any of us. Millennials' preferred communication is email, text, and social media. So I thought, how can I take what people already know, which is that you need to use these tools, and help you use them better? And frankly, there's a couple really good books here. If you're going to be writing for Twitter or writing for social media like Facebook, there is a writing style that you need. All of us, I admitted I was a boomer earlier, and those of you who are boomers or even Gen X may be familiar with Strunk and White. It was a style guide, and it's a great book. Omit Needless Words is actually a quote from that book too. But it's not just omitting needless words, it's the idea of how do you grab attention? Because these two books were written to say your communication is going to be absorbed and read, if you're lucky, in a environment in which there are millions and millions of people vying for attention. So grabbing attention is a much more important issue, and both of these books talk about it. The second one is a little more strategic. The first one is much more about the specific task of writing concisely and writing persuasively. Then if you're going to omit needless words, there's lots of these types of lists going around the internet. You can find that annoying buzzwords are the first things you should get rid of. And annoying buzzwords too, by the way, are a way, without you knowing it, of saying you're about ready to step into the boring world of old people business. Young people, when they hear these words, are starting to get the idea that, wow, you think like a older type of business person than I do. Okay, social media is something that I just mentioned is one of the things that is one of their preferred communication vehicles. And the key point I want to make with this slide is that you need to be able to use the media as it's expected to be used, all right? So don't go on social media and put on things that look like your print brochure. I have a couple examples here. This is a woman, she's a speaker at a conference, and she did a couple of really nice tweets. If you had your attendees following some of the speakers like this, she made a nice little video. She says, this is why I take the red eye every night. And she's just cuddling with her little kid. It's an adorable little video. And then she's actually showing how she met another presenter at a conference. The tall blonde woman is the one who's sending out the tweet here. But she was so proud to have this book from one of the other presenters. She's acting as if she's an audience as opposed to a presenter. Again, a nice way for her to connect with the people that see this. And I put on that bullet points there, the last one. Keep in mind that what we're doing is we're trying to share our personal life here, and that personal life and business life, there's very little difference to a lot of these millennials. The word is balance, and balance doesn't mean 50% strictly business, 50% family. It means there's family and business elements to almost everything we do. So acknowledge that and use the social media to share your personal sides as well. Okay, in the media section we have here, there's this picture, by the way, is millennials are not running as much as the older generations. I don't know how many of you are runners, but they are doing these types of things. There's the mud run and the fun run and these obstacle courses. And these are called color runs. And they're all untimed and they're all about sociability. But it's a way of adding fun and enjoyment to something that you generally didn't have that much fun to it before. And what they're doing is they're, in a way, this is rather abstract, but they're using their bodies as a medium. They're expressing themselves with the way they look. And in this section, I'm going to be talking about not only media channels, but different media languages. This is a visual language they're using to communicate right here. Okay, know you're different. The millennial is going to be expecting you to use, well, you can see the red box there is that they like the internet and social media. And that's something we just covered, but also notice that you are in the red boxes on the right, and you are somebody who likes the telephone more than they do. What I wanted to make the point here is that as you try to think like a millennial, do the inverse of that. Ask yourself, how do I need to stop thinking like a boomer or a Gen X so that I can get more closely in their heads? Okay, namaste is a word that some of you may know. It's a Hindi word. It means I see you. And while I put this in here because I just covered off a bunch of different slides that were about technical information and using technology, face-to-face is still very important. And that is something I see in a lot of your the work in your industry, so I know you all know this. So I thought if I could add one more layer of understanding that to that, I put in here, this is a good friend of mine speaking at TEDx in Copenhagen on what if we trusted you? And this is an interesting question because trust scores are going way down, but trust is a very important concept because we're living a much more networked life. Millennials are the driving force behind Uber, behind Airbnb. You're going to have somebody come live in your house. There's a lot of trust there. Are you really representing yourself online the way you really are? We are not trusting institutions. We're not trusting big companies. We're not trusting big corporations. We're not trusting governments. So this generation has grown up very, I don't want to say cynical. That almost sounds like the previous generation, Gen X. But the millennials are asking, how can I work better with you? How can I collaborate with you? And that requires trust. And that's what this talk that Jerry gives would talk about. Okay, keep in mind that media are mostly a means to an end, because as we go through the different media, and whether you're using Facebook or Twitter or YouTube, well, all of those are really just ways of gathering their attention. And the media are the vehicles for gathering it, but it's the richness that the value comes from their attention. And millennials know it. They know you're trying to get their attention. They grew up in a world where they were being marketed to constantly. And so they understand that how they spend their attention is something that's valuable to them and to you. So one option there is, I was trying to imagine when you hear that and you're trying to get people to pay their attention, say it's at the event and you've got a presenter, you want everyone with their eyes on the guy on the stage. Well, all these millennials, they're not even paying attention. They're all on their devices. Maybe they're doing their Facebook or something. You know what? That's okay. And you're not going to stop that. In fact, never ask them to put their devices away, because that's almost like death. There's a great book out called The Cyborg Anthropologist. And it talks about how these devices are really extensions of ourselves, particularly for those like the millennials who grew up with them. But you also want them using their device to capture the moment. You know, never say, don't write this down, for example, you know, because what you're doing is you're asking them to, you're saying, I'm going to be sending this to you later, so you don't need to pay attention now. You've just given them permission to check their email. All the red bullet points, or sorry, the orange bullet points that are there, I put those up there to try to suggest a strategy for dealing with this situation. One strategy that I think is most common is people say, we're going to do the best we can to have a compelling person on the stage presented with compelling music or video or slides, whatever it is. But if that person is engaging, then we don't have to worry about their attention wandering. Okay, that's a good strategy. That's one. An option would be, what if I owned 8 different channels for their attention? What if I had the main stage, but I also had an Instagram feed going on simultaneously, and I was Facebook living this? If they're going to take their attention away from the stage, give them alternatives to go to that you control. So these types of engage the way you want to strategies are really effective with millennials. Okay, this I don't want to go through now, but I put this slide in here for you to reference later, because some of you might be needing to use media that help you target millennials, and these are some examples of media companies that you might want to work with. Okay, tonality. Now the tonality of these communications is super critical. You may get the message right, but if you get the tone wrong, you're dead. I have a picture here that is quite obviously, it's just a stock footage. Everybody's wearing suit and ties, and very few millennials are going to make a connection with this. Somebody, you know, I put together this, and perhaps I was putting together a communication I was sending out for my event, and I can feel really good because, you know, it's a nice quality photo here. It's going to be ignored. This is wallpaper in their world. It's not relevant whatsoever. Remember the I'm a Mac, I'm a PC ad? They actually understood that really well. And so it's not the, you know, the millennial, it was definitely Gen X at the time. But what they did is they simply used the visual of the business person to say, you just don't get it. You're old school. And they really depositioned Microsoft and IBM, that entire PC world, with that one simple personification of their brand. This is brilliant. So my key point is, know what tonality and what visual language not to use. This, on the right-hand side, all of you, if you haven't seen this already, really take a look at it. It's called, this is a generic brand video. And it literally is a generic brand video. And I love this in so many different ways. It has 2 million views. It's been around for a couple of years. But a woman just wrote a poem about all the mundane, boring things she sees companies using in their communications. And she wrote a poem about it. Well, this company, Dissolve, is a stock footage company. They took all their stock footage and made a video out of her poem. And it was brilliant because it's funny to watch. It gets it's very shareable. But the entire point is their stock footage is in there, and they've had 2 million people sending their advertisement around. Okay, design matters almost more than anything else. In the millennial world, I had in my last presentation a fact that they grew up in a very well-designed world. That's how brands and companies and media competed with each other, with superior design. They are very design literate. They know what good design is and what bad design is, and they won't even read it if it looks boring, if it doesn't look right. This, by the way, is Elite Daily. It's a nice website to go to. And this is a nice technique to use. If you're getting ready to put communications together, go to Elite Daily. You're seeing what their world looks like, and it just gives you a way to maybe pick up a phrase or a visual language that they use, even a color scheme, something that shows that you know what their world looks like. This is more of a millennial type of an image right here. They are very design savvy. And so just showing this type of environment, a lot of the events that you put on are in what would be more like the hotel conference room. Look at how the millennials are doing. They're going back to lofts and they're reclaiming old warehouse districts. There's much more of this type of a feel to their world, and thus there should be in their communications as well. I'm sorry, I couldn't really just do anything but say, when I got online and looked at, okay, how are people portraying their last event that they went to? I see so many of these types of images. And there's a couple of points to be made. One is, if I put on this, and if you actually recognize this, I'm really sorry. But there was not a lot of effort made in saying, we know millennials are taking pictures, so let's make sure it's an awesome picture. That is not, no setting was created here to make a picture that works. Even the lighting doesn't work. If somebody's thinking of going to an event of yours, and you had that event last year, they're going to do what they do. They're going to do research, and they're going to probably go to Tumblr, which is where most of their friends are, or Instagram, and they're going to see what people are posting there. You're lucky in one sense. Most millennials will not post pictures that are not great pictures. They're self-editing. But those who don't self-edit are filling the internet with pictures like this. And this becomes, well, let's go back to the very first slide. What's the first thing I told you should be your top priority to convey? It's emotion. How do I feel if I go to your event? This is how they would answer that question. And I think they're more likely to go to a movie that weekend than they are to go see whatever it is you're putting on. So here's some advice. This is a great page to just keep as a reference. Just go and check out their websites, their top YouTubers, and yes, millennials are actually looking at YouTubers as stars. These stars on YouTube are even bigger than movie stars and music. I shouldn't say bigger than, some of them are, but they are up at the level. If you're in the gaming world or the YouTube world, you can be a huge star that millennials have never even, that boomers have never even heard about. This man right here is PewDiePie. He makes probably $35 million a year. He gets about 4 or 5 million people watching his videos on YouTube every single day. And he makes a ton of ad revenue. What does he do? He just plays games and you get to watch him play, and he just talks about how good or bad the game is. That is a very, and when I say he's popular, if you looked at Justin Bieber, he's probably the most popular person on YouTube. He has more followers than Justin Bieber. He has more video views than Justin Bieber. So, and he's somebody that most of us haven't even heard of. Okay, I've got pictures of podcasts. Podcasts are really a nice thing. More and more millennials, they're not listening to the radio. They're either streaming music or listening to podcasts. There is a tonality to a podcast, a casualness. Listen to them and you get the feel for how they talk about business. These right here are different podcasts that relate to how does a millennial understand the business world. I would really recommend going through those. And then on the left side, this is BuzzFeed. BuzzFeed is probably one of the top 2 or 3 websites that they go to. Just go to it for the type of thing that they're used to seeing. You're competing with BuzzFeed when you're sending out communications. And by the way, I was myself shocked. I didn't realize how much they had gotten into their own original programming. They're creating shows. It's really taken off. I thought it was just a small part of what they did. Here is one of my favorite, probably, I'm going to go ahead and go right out there. I'm going on a limb here. This is my favorite TV show. And I love it as a market researcher, as a cultural researcher, because everything about this show is really constructed out of cultural currencies that matter to millennials. The hero is a hacker, and there's a vibe in the millennial mind that says, who do we see as heroic? And smart people are heroic. We've gone to the Big Bang type of hero versus the 24 kind of hero who uses a gun and gets his way that way. Hackers are really cool. Hackers are the good guys. They go up against the people we fear, like evil corporations and big governments. In the first season, that was last year, they just finished the second season. This is the hero. And you might have heard of him because his name is Rami Malek. He just won the Emmy for the best actor. And so this show's getting even more play. But this show is enjoyable at many different levels. If you go to the Reddit feed, you can see the after show conversations, there is so much richness into, did this hacker use the right hacker language? Did he use the right devices? Could he have done it a different way? Even when they actually freeze frame things and say, the programming language is on the screen, and they would correct the programming language, or they would say, no millennial would use a password that simple. There was a part where they see the notebook image on the right-hand side? They just casually, for less than 2 seconds, showed him flipping through his journal, and on one page was this. Well, the smart millennials, they stopped, they took a picture of this, it led to a website that only you get to see, not the rest of the viewing audience, because you were smart enough to see it. They really play with lots of layers of communication. Nostalgia is a really good thing. Nostalgia just in general plays a lot of different roles. It helps us, remember earlier on I was talking about savoring. You can go and reminisce. That really helps you enjoy the moment again later on. There's a wonderful song out there called Stressed Out by 21 Pilots. And it's those 2 guys there on their big wheels. These are guys clearly too big to be on their big wheels again. But that's something they remember from their kids. The entire song is about how really hard it is to grow up into the adult world and how they wish they could just be playing and making up names for each other and playing in a treehouse. And so listen to the song. I think it's almost an anthem for that generation. But keep in mind what you're doing here is you're just trying to create fond memories. And if you want people to just breathe and relax, these types of references are a great way to do that. Perhaps if you're having a break at a meeting or something, and then they were to come out and just find like giveaway slap bracelets or koosh balls that they remember from their past, it's a nice way to kind of help get people's shoulders to drop and people to just breathe a little more deeply. Humor is really important. In fact, I didn't see it quite so much in the literature from your industry that I was scanning, but it's in a lot of the marketing literature that the number one way to communicate with a millennial guy is to use humor. But there is good humor and there is bad humor. And if you're an older boomer like me, sometimes you see the stuff that the Gen X folks, like the dudes grew up with, and you think, oh, those young people, they like that kind of humor. That was very slapstick humor. That was all about just doing your own thing and rebelling. That is no longer what millennials do. That doing your own thing is almost the antithesis of being a collaborator and being part of something bigger than yourself. Think about millennial humor as being clever. Aristotle said, wit is educated insolence, and I really like that. It has to be a little snarky, that's the insolence. But the wit is also about, oh, I get it. There has to be a cleverness to it. Silicon Valley is a great show for that kind of humor, if you want to see that. And I love this ad right here. You're in good hands with Allstate ad. That millennial woman right there, she's getting the upper hand. She's the better driver. She's the smarter person in the room. And she becomes the, I have the power because I'm better attitude. But it's done in a very witty way, not in a in your face. Well, look, actually it is in his face, isn't it?
Literally.
Literally. It's about celebrating being good at something, as opposed to the slacker who just was off just doing whatever. Oh, okay. Now, failure is something that's fascinating. I think this generation, they haven't quite gotten there, but they are redefining failure. It's in the business literature in terms of the lean startup says try, fail, learn, repeat. You hear about that, fail fast, fail early, fail often. That is a strategy that Stanford, actually, Eric Ries at Stanford has really been the one leading that, and it works quite well. And if you're in a fast-paced startup, you almost have to do that. I love the term perpetual beta, which means that you're constantly rethinking and fixing everything you do. But failure is something you might actually want to help celebrate there. It's better to fail and fall forward. And that's what that millennial Anna Akbari was talking about when she's talking about how to hack your life. She says, taking the time to learn from your failures and then doing something about them is important. And when you celebrate your failures, you at something like FailCon, there's actually conferences that some of you probably know, where you just get up and you share your failures. The reason? A smart man learns from the mistakes of others, all right? Or a smart man learns from his own mistakes. A wise man learns from the mistakes of others. So hearing as much as you can about others' failures is a great way to learn. So there are some other important tonalities. I just want to leave this slide and pass over it for now, but there are different tones that you can use, and all of these are appropriate for millennials. That's why they're in here. But I want to get into experiences, because without a doubt, you'd have to be dead if you hadn't heard that millennials love their experiences. They would much rather pay for an experience than pay for things, and they are really looking for this. You are offering an experience, and in fact, your side excursions and different things could be great ways to enhance this. So I think you're in a natural position to try to understand experiences better, because when other marketers say, okay, we're going to give millennials an experience, they don't have the opportunity to deliver the way you do. And I was really jealous. At Coca-Cola, we are great experienced marketers, but we have control over a bottle and a can. We can't control the physical environment. You can control the physical environment much more than we can. So you have the ability to deliver the experience. And here's how I'd like you to think about experiences. We all talk about them, but an experience is a way to create a currency. A currency is a medium of exchange. Actually, that's where it comes from. The word current and currency, flow, like a current in a river, is how we exchange value back and forth. The millennial concept of value and exchange is through stories and photos. The currencies that matter the most to them. In fact, I'm going to try to remember this one. The woman who founded Kiva.org said she was giving a commencement speech at UCLA, and she said, I want you to build a life in the currencies that matter. It's a brilliant expression, because the currencies that matter are your social currencies, and your emotional currencies. And in the context of what you guys are doing for a living, it's stories and photos. Almost all the time, an experience is social. And when you gather your experiences, it helps create you as a unique individual. You are who you are because your experiences are different than the person sitting next to you. And I've actually, I've received resumes from millennials. The coolest one was this woman put a line right down the middle of the page, and on the left side, she put all of her life experiences on that timeline. And then on the right side, she had all of her business experiences and her educational experiences. And so there was a gap in her business, timeline. And if she hadn't put the left-hand column there, I would have no idea what she was doing. She was off in Haiti after the earthquake, working there. And then you start reading about these experiences. When you're comparing one resume to the other, you don't tell yourself you're going to pick the one that's got the cool experiences on it. But frankly, it was a huge factor in deciding this person is a fuller person, and they come in. So the key point is, these millennials want to collect stories, they want to collect photos. How are you able to provide those currencies when you put together your event? So I just want to conclude right now that with a few points. I know I went through this, it was a lot there. Frankly, it's just a collection of good ideas. And as I tried to say early with that Think Different slide, I know that many of these ideas are not going to work for you in particular, but some of them will work for others. And hopefully you found 3 or 4 good ideas in here that you can maybe print out that slide and try to put it up on the wall, maybe remember as you're putting together your next communication. But hopefully what I've done is I entertained your elephants. There was some kind of emotional engagement in this. If you really hated me or really loved me, that's great. In fact, we just elected our president who kind of understood that theory quite well. But I also want to inform your writers. You need to have positive, strong reasons to do something different to improve your communications. And finally, I hope I've enhanced our social connection. You know me a little bit better. I did not get to hear your voices, but you heard mine. But creating a connection between us, those are the 3 things that hopefully I did with this presentation, and they're the 3 things I hope that you're able to do with your next event.
Thank you very much, Tom. You will all receive an email from us that'll give you a link to the video so you can watch it again yourself or share it with your associates. You'll also receive a link to be able to download the entire presentation from Tom, along with a series of accompanying notes. If anyone has any questions, you can use the Q&A button, and you could send us a note, and we'd be happy to answer any questions. Okay, it looks like we have no questions at this point, but again, thank you all very much for your time this afternoon. And as Tom said, I hope you've all gotten at least a few takeaways that you can use. So thank you again very much. Have a good rest of the day.